Listen, everybody, you have to understand this. When you train like Artem Lobov to be the best, you have to fight the best. And it starts with Paulie Malignaggi. No, I'm just kidding, guys. Welcome to another edition of the Body Lock Podcast. It's your boy, Nick V, fresh off the BKFC 6 press conference, media run, weigh-ins. We did all that. And honestly, it was a great experience. I just want to shout out to Bare Knuckle. Honored to be there as part of media, setting up the round-by-round coverage. I got to meet a lot of people, legends in the making. Some are already, legends in the game as well. And I don't even know where to start. We're going to talk about the fights, but real quick, I wanted to talk about the lead-up because I was there for the press conference. By the way, if you haven't seen, we have some videos of the Q&A that was going on, the back and forth between Malignaggi, Lobov, Bedford as well. Bedford had some hilarious one-liners in that in that press conference. If you didn't catch it, and it was just such a crazy, hectic moment. First for me, honestly, as a media guy, doing all this and like experiencing it. It was great. I got a chance to ask Chris Leben a question, and he came up to me afterwards and said, "Thank you for asking me a question and not the freak show," which was really cool. Like, it was just like a feather in my cap kind of moment. Like, damn, like I really did something. I'm doing something, and
that sounds like something Chris Leben would say.
Yeah, it was great. And what's crazy is, like, since that interaction I've had with him, I've done like so much, like, just looking into Chris Leben, not just as a fighter but as a person. And man, he's such an interesting dude, and I wish I did my homework more to get interviews and about these guys, not just as fighters but as people. I wish I would have done a little bit more due diligence in that sense earlier, but you know what I'm saying. You're always going to have shoulda, coulda, wouldas in that situation, but nonetheless, great experience as a press conference. I thought it was a really crazy moment. Artem Lobov really coming into his own as a media, he's savvy with what he says and how he says it. One thing that I found interesting, though, that I kind of wanted to highlight, if anybody goes and watches the press conference Q&A video, every single time that Malignaggi or Lobov or anybody, like, they started cursing, David Feldman, who's the owner of Bare Knuckle, man, he had an absolute, like, there were times where we even zoomed in to David Feldman's face because you could see him, like, visibly get upset at, whenever Lobov said, "Oh, this fucking guy," whenever he threw in the F word, like, needlessly, it just became such a problem. And I thought that was so funny, where it's like, what made the press conference so controversial and, like, fun is exactly what the owner did not want. And I thought that was kind of interesting, like, that kind of dichotomy. But nonetheless, like, everything ended up going down as it did. The fights ended up panning out. Chris Leben lost, but had a really good back and forth with Dakota Cochrane, which is also a guy. And then, this is like the foibles of MMA media. I got a really good interview with Dakota Cochrane, right? We had a video app that we were using to record it, and it was off my phone. And for some reason, the video of Dakota did not flip when we flipped the camera, so the whole video is upside down, like my interview with him. And we couldn't, like, 360 crop it or nothing. Like, I tried on iMovie, like, we were on the go, like, I didn't have my laptop ready to go or anything like that. It was just so funny, like, just little things that you run into that just kind of complicate your day. But and it was just a great little experience and doing all that. But all right, let's get into the fights. I want to start with Malignaggi and Lobov. First off, this fight kind of underwhelmed me. I wanted a little bit more, just kind of throwing with reckless intention. Obviously, I knew that we weren't going to get that on Malignaggi's side. He is a pure boxer. But Lobov, I just thought he was playing a little bit too much to the clinch. Obviously, that's the route that you want to go when you're the MMA guy in a bare knuckle setting. But the ref wasn't even letting them clinch that much, which was also a really weird, caveat to this fight compared to other bare knuckle fights. There wasn't a lot of clinch work being allowed, which obviously frustrated Artem Lobov. And then I started noticing, in the first round, Malignaggi was doing a great job of probing with the jab. As soon as Artem Lobov would come in, he'd spin out 1-2. And as the rounds progressed, he keeps on finding those openings, but he's not throwing the right hand. And I'm just like, what is up with Paulie Malignaggi? Sure enough, at the end of the fight, we learned that his hand's broken, and that obviously cost him not, to be able to throw the right hand the way he wanted to, and he had to rely on his left hand, and that's why he ended up with both hands swollen as fuck.
Broke it in the fight, or it was a previous injury?
Broke it in the second round, which I do believe, because everything after the second round, I go back and watch that fight, he just seemed way more tentative. In that fourth round specifically, I remember live thinking, dude, he is hesitating on that right hand. What the hell is going on? And I speak to the guy next to me. I can't remember his name, what media entity he was from, but he was saying the biggest thing about Paulie Malignaggi leaving his boxing career was his hands. He had brittle hands, and sure enough, he suffered from the same exact thing this fight, which is really, I feel like we were robbed of like the absolute best night that we could have had. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It depended on Paulie's hand health, but nonetheless, great night, great main event. I thought Artem Lobov did his thing. I'm glad that they made up. They were able to reconcile their differences, because it did really seem like borderline hostile when we were at the press conference and stuff. It was just kind of like, this is a little bit extra than trash talk. It's a little bit extra than these guys really don't like each other. It just seemed that there was a different element to it that wasn't always good, wasn't always positive in terms of like outlook for the company and what they wanted to portray. But nonetheless, I thought it was a good result. Artem Lobov, he's kind of like carrying this bare knuckle banner and really stepping into his own. I think he could sell a fight against a broomstick. He is a very charismatic dude, and I love that the people that memed him for being the GOAT in MMA, they have followed him in bare knuckle, and that's where they're getting a lot of press from, where they're getting a lot of attention from.
Hey, as they say, there's no publicity is bad publicity.
Exactly. So, real quick, Siri, before we go on to the other fights, what was your thoughts on the main event, Artem Lobov in general, Paulie Malignaggi as well? I think he had the longest post-fight speech ever for a guy that lost. I mean, that was like a next level, but what were your thoughts on that?
Well, I understand that Malignaggi was at one point a world champion boxer, but at the same time, I was never... it's relative, but I was never even really impressed with Malignaggi when he was just boxing. Mm-hmm. So even though I expected him to run circles around Artem Lobov, which he almost did, except then he couldn't throw his right hand, so he had no way to score significant hits. Mm-hmm. As for the quick clinch breaks, I can kind of understand, because they're trying to grow BKFC. Malignaggi Lobov, I think, is their biggest headlining fight so far, right?
I would agree. Yeah, I think at the most buzz.
And as vital as clinch work is to just boxing in general, I'm not saying it's fair, but I can understand why they would want to limit clinches as much as possible, so they get the most enjoyable product for what was their biggest night. I mean, obviously, Paulie has brittle hands, but if this is obviously like a sanctioned bare knuckle league, but if you look at just bare knuckle in general throughout history, you're not supposed to aim for the human skull without gloves. Human skull is slanted; it's really thick. If you hit it in the wrong part, you will absolutely hurt your hand. So I expected a lot more gut shots. I expected a lot more body punches than I saw. And maybe, hey, you know what? Every sport needs time to evolve. If you look at early Pride and UFC and compare that to what the fighters are doing now, it's night and day. So maybe that's just the next evolution of BKFC. Right now, we're all headshots, but it's disappointing the way Paulie lost. If Paulie had just gotten out-brawled by Lobov, I would have accepted it, even if I do find Lobov a bit of a joke. But to have him just not be able to do anything and just barely get edged out, it was a little disheartening. Hopefully it won't affect BKFC's growth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think it will. I think this was overall a net positive, although I think, and again, I'm not one to say they should cook the books or anything with the judging and stuff like that, but if the interest was to keep Paulie Malignaggi, they should have given him the fight. But, with the way things unfolded, he broke his hand. He guaranteed he's never fighting again.
Yep.
It's good that Artem Lobov won. Dakota Cochrane versus Chris Leben, kind of an interesting decision because I think from a control standpoint, maybe if this was a UFC fight, Chris Leben wins those 5 rounds. But I could understand the forward pressure that Dakota was bringing. He was the person to get out of the clinch and immediately throw a left hook or a right hook that would land. And that's the kind of stuff that I think that they were giving points on rather than the controlled kind of physical imposition that Chris Leben was going for. So when you see
it looked like Leben tired out quicker than Cochrane did.
Definitely, yeah. And
and I think maybe that's what it had to do with maybe even though he was pressuring, they just saw he didn't have the energy to do a lot, and they just considered Cochrane's offense more valuable.
Yeah, moral of the story, what I'm trying to say is like I don't think there's a completely definitive criteria yet for like what bare knuckle wants in a winner and stuff like that, and it's just still a little wishy-washy. And like you said, the game itself is going to evolve. Me and Chris Leben were talking about that a little bit at the press conference, where he believes the clinch is the beginning, middle, and end of what is a successful MMA fighter in this bare knuckle game. And going towards the future, I think he thinks that's going to be number 1. And if you see some of Johnny Bedford's fights coming up, he just won the lightweight title at BKFC 6, but he had a couple fights in the lead up to that in the tournament where he's just busting people up, uppercut to the clinch, and that's like if you're good in that realm and you're you're a grappler by trade, not really a striker, there's still a home for you in bare knuckle. You just have to figure out how to impose your gifts. And that's what I found so interesting. But again, if you only saw the main event for BKFC 6, I understand you wanted to see the freak show. But ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you, there is the best fight on that card: Reggie Barnett Jr. versus Johnny Bedford. When you talk about ebbs and flows, kind of one fighter just completely eviscerating a guy and then watching the turn of momentum as the boxer starts to find his spots, outclass the MMA guy, but the MMA guy still has brute force and is able to claw back with some major shots. I just thought the poetry of that fight, which was the third fight leading up to the main event, absolutely beautiful. If you have time, please go watch that fight. It's only 10 minutes. And it's really great because Johnny Bedford knocked Barnett down twice in the first round, clean knockdowns. And then Barnett is still able to come back, win the second and third. And then Bedford gets another knockdown in the fourth. And I'd say he ends the fifth round the better fighter. But what was really interesting in the lead up to the fifth round, Bedford gives Barnett a hug, and you could tell like all the BS that was going on in the fight, and then the lead up to the fight, it was just all water under the bridge at that point. They earned each other's respect, and they both turned in a fantastic fifth round. Please, if you do anything this weekend, if you're bored, you got downtime, go watch that fight. It really gave me because these are the bare knuckle fighters that are going to stick around. Obviously, Bedford just won the title. Barnett, former boxer, but he looks like bare knuckle is his home. I think that fight right there is emblematic of everything Bare Knuckle FC should be, and they should keep on going for stuff like that, and those guys should be the household names. Really good fight. Did you have any thoughts on that, and anything else you want to touch on Bare Knuckle?
No, I agree. Bedford Barnett was best fight of the night. I guess. How does BKFC scoring work? Obviously, each round is 10 points. But is it the same as boxing where a knockdown automatically turns into a 10-8 and it ticks down for every knockdown after that, or not?
I think so, because the Bedford results were pretty lopsided. Some were...
Well, they were lopsided, but they were 5 rounds, right?
Yeah, 5 rounds.
Yeah. It was 5 rounds. So
and there were multiple knockdowns because...
Right, but I'm pretty sure Barnett ended up with at least 45 points on a couple scorecards. Oh, you know what? No. He got a 10-8 on. He lost a 10-8 on a couple rounds, but then I think one other round got right.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah. The math works out. Okay, yeah. It was a great fight. Go watch it.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I just thought that the back and forth, Barnett proved that he was tough. A lot of people were saying that he doesn't have the the grit to stick around with a seasoned MMA fighter like Bedford. He proved everybody wrong. I was walking out of the venue after the press conference, and Barnett is sitting there in a chair, both of his hands completely iced, taped up. You know what I'm saying? He has a big black eye, fat lip on the other end. And I'm just like, hey, Barnett, legendary fight, man. Really, it was an honor. I just sat down in passing. And he was like, hey, thanks, man. He didn't even know where I was. Like, he couldn't even, like, accurately.
Oof.
I mean, but, like, I laughed, but, like, he wasn't, in obvious pain. He was already, taken care of. Like, he was in transition, So, like, in the process of being taken care of, it wasn't anything, like, morbid or anything like that, but truly a great fight, and you really get to see up close and personal what these guys put into the cage. Any kind of combat sport, it is brutal work, man. But enough about me. I think I've been talking enough. I want to hear your take. We're gonna switch over to the UFC. You got the sweater, you got the swag. Tell me what you thought about the Korean Zombie this weekend. Just highlight that performance for me.
Oh my gosh, so excited. So dang excited. I love Korean Zombie. Him against Dustin Poirier is one of the best UFC fights that no one remembers or like possibly watched. Mm-hmm. It's so funny because when we were predicting it, I said that if the same Korean Zombie that showed up against Yair Rodriguez, which he was winning that fight by decision, but he was still walking into a lot of shots. I said if that one shows up, then Moisano is just gonna he's just gonna run circles around him. Mm-hmm. But if the really good one, the one that showed up against Poirier, the one that showed up against Bermudez, if he shows up, then that's gonna be a fight. I'll say this: I know Korean Zombie hits hard. Never thought he'd. That was basically a one-shot knockout. The fact that Moisano did not just curl into the fetal position and crap his pants after that punch, all seriousness, credit to him, because that punch was loud. You could hear it over the mic.
Yeah.
When that overhand right landed over the jab, and Moisano was still kind of with it, But that punch, we don't know a lot because it happened in like 50 seconds, You can't learn a lot from a 50-second fight. But most telling is there was a post-fight interview with Moisano's trainer. And he said, I don't know what to say about this loss because he had a great training camp. He was technically perfect. And the only thing he could say is, I guess Korean Zombie watched a lot of film on us and just sat down for the jab. And it wasn't a bad jab. If you saw Moisano just throw that with no one in front of him, you'd say that's pretty good. Mm-hmm. But Korean Zombie predicted it. And it wasn't a soft counter. Most counters that you throw over the jab are almost straight. I mean, you have to have a little arc to go over, but you go straight. His was a swinging counter.
Right. It was basically
he dipped it and swung a right hook that caught him perfectly in the jaw. That was a perfect counter. Mm-hmm.
And the lead up, like he landed the punch right after so quick.
And the thing is, the left hook didn't land. He wasn't automatically throwing a combination. Mm-hmm. You could see he saw he was going down with the right hand and waited and then threw the left to catch him again.
Yeah. And
man, I know Jeremy Stevens called him out, but Jeremy Stevens is coming off a couple losses, so it's a bit cheeky. Mm-hmm. I'm looking forward to what hopefully is going to be the Aldo rematch.
Yeah.
You didn't get to see, obviously, in the new UFC, this is the highlight that's going to define Korean Zombie when they're promoting him. Mm-hmm. That and the twister over Leonard Garcia, obviously. That's not even half of what. Not even half. That's a fraction of what Korean Zombie can do. So if this was your first introduction to him, awesome. Stay tuned. I mean, he's always struggled with injuries and then his Korean military service, so he hasn't been very active. But at his best, man, he's really good. He's really, really good. And that counter was just, you only throw that counter if you know it's going to land. Mm-hmm. And he did. Yeah. Because otherwise he's completely out of position. That's a swinging right off of a jab. Mm-hmm. Moisano might not be there anymore. The punch might be retracted, but dipped perfectly, swung over. And it's so good to see. I mean, I'm hoping we're getting the Aldo rematch because he's a better fighter than he was the first time they met. And Aldo slowed down a bit. So rematch with Aldo, maybe he'll get a chance to be fed into the Max Holloway threshing machine. Who knows?
Right. I think that's an excellent matchup. You're right, and they're at divergent paths in their career. And God damn it, Korean Zombie looked really good. So let's get him back in there as soon as possible. And now let's switch over to Bellator London real quick because I wanted to talk about this main event. It was kind of hard to watch, depending on where you were at, DAZN, all these different, pre-tape methods, annoying. But anyways, if you ended up able to catch the fight, Gegard Mousasi versus Rafael Lovato. I mean, what else could you say? Like, this was already probably the highest pedigree fight on the weekend, but obviously I think Bare Knuckle took over in terms of, popularity, what people were talking about. But there's no doubt that I think but when it was all said and done, a product as a product, I think Bellator had, the most memorable night in terms of, what happened with James Gallagher, what happened with this fight. It was the exact kind of fight that needed to happen for Rafael Lovato to be put over. And we did not see I heard some people saying, oh, we're going to see an unmotivated Gegard Mousasi. He's kind of checked out. This was not a checked out Gegard Mousasi. He was very much in form, very much looking for the win, finding ways to, get out of the puzzle that is Rafael Lovato's grappling, but he just couldn't. In a lot of ways, he was overwhelmed. Obviously, he did have his comeback. He did start surging in the later rounds, but I think in the 5th round, it was secured. Lovato was able to find it. I'm not mad with, one judge giving the draw, given the 10-8, how you slice things up. I could see that. I'm okay with that even. But I think it was a great run for Rafael Lovato. And he's already talking about taking on Machida, trying something different, and being active as a champion, which is something that would be awesome because I think we needed this new blood. I mean, not that Lovato is new blood, but he is new in terms of, world championship material on this stage where everybody finally gets to know him.
Bellator needs stars that aren't UFC cast-offs.
Right.
So, yeah.
Exactly.
So to have Lovato win is nice. They have something that resembles homegrown talent. Like 100%. when Eddie Alvarez was still with them, when Will Brooks didn't dumpster his own career joining the UFC. So, yeah, Lovato's the next in line.
Yeah, 100%. And, again, if you didn't catch this fight, please go watch it. Just a clinic both on both ends, and just a great depiction of where MMA is at right now in 2019. And so yeah, I think that was pretty much covering everything that happened last week. Now we want to get into the more perspective, what's next, what's on the horizon. And next week, June 29th, we have Francis Ngannou versus JDS headlining UFC on ESPN3. So, I mean, I feel like there's only so much you could say when you're predicting what's going to happen in a Francis Ngannou fight. It's like, he either destroys or gets destroyed, or, something in the middle, and it ends up not being a fun fight. I think this one's a little different in terms of what JDS brings to the table, how he can make this more interesting in a multitude of ways. How do you see this one playing out, Siri?
So, Junior Dos Santos is probably the best offensive boxer that the UFC heavyweight has ever seen. Defensively, there's some really big holes, but offensively, at his best, he's so devastating. So the question really is, which Junior Dos Santos shows up? There's the Junior Dos Santos that twice against Stipe Miocic and once against Alistair Overeem just backed up to the fence, or just left himself open and got dropped by a big shot. And that should tell you, look, Junior Dos Santos used to not get dropped. Even despite being the brawler he had an iron chin. And even now, he wears the shot pretty well, not as good as he used to. The thing is, he's not afraid, but he's going to respect Francis Ngannou's power. You have to if you fight Francis Ngannou. No one's going to just go in there and try to win a firefight with him. But Francis Ngannou does have those long limbs that he can cast over the top. And that punch that can catch Junior Dos Santos when he has his chin high against the fence, Ngannou has that punch. So, honestly, I think if Francis Ngannou can get Junior Dos Santos a couple times against the fence in the first couple rounds, I think he'll get the knockout. Past that, it's Junior's fight. It's so hard to tell because Junior stopped being in close fights for a while now. He either gets stomped or he does the stomping with very little in between.
Mm-hmm.
And Ngannou's style doesn't lend to long wars, like we saw against Miocic. He's not built for that. So I don't know. I love Junior Dos Santos. I think his defensive holes, if he had fixed them and just changed up strategically, he'd be the best heavyweight champion in UFC history because he would have smoked Kane twice. Mm-hmm. As it stands, he's wearing so much damage. I don't know. He still sometimes circles on the fence with his chin high. It's just a bad habit. It's just so long in his career. I'm actually going to go with Ngannou. I think Ngannou can get the knockout here.
Right. I think Ngannou's more in form, more in his prime. What I really want to see from this fight, I don't really care about this fight if Francis Ngannou just starches him 14 seconds, first punch he lands, boom, it's over. That doesn't really interest me with Francis Ngannou. I want to see him take a next step, show like a level of evolution in his game, because I kind of feel like he's stagnated ever since he got to that world championship pedigree, he got to that platform. It feels like the only thing that's really changed about him is his haircut. You know what I'm saying? He hasn't really brought different elements into his game where he can show us that he's been improving in the ground game, or he understands that the right hand is his best weapon. How do I implement that differently? How do I incorporate that in a different scenario against fighters of a higher pedigree? Because JDS, obviously, for you can say about his chin deteriorating or anything like that, there is still a base level of technical skill that Francis Ngannou has to be on par with if he wants to win. And I just want to see like that next level evolution, whether that be showing off that he has a great ground game or submission defense or something like that. I just need to see that for me to be like, okay, Ngannou is worth caring about going into the future, or is he just going to be another like one and done? Hey, let's put him on a card because we can get a nice first round knockout and boom, be done with it. There needs to be something else.
It all depends. Can Ngannou push JDS against the fence? Because no matter how hard he swings, if he fights Junior Dos Santos in open canvas, just boxing, Junior will piece him up.
Really? Yeah.
Especially, I mean,
after the
Junior obviously has a huge overhand right and a good uppercut. His counter left with his back when backing up is really good. People don't give that enough credit. His closing left hook is actually pretty lethal.
Right. And he's knocked out some people like that.
Yeah, I think the only reason that Miocic didn't win their first meeting is that closing left hook, because he was beating up Dos Santos really badly. Mm-hmm. And then I don't know if it was the third or the fourth round, but he tried to come in on Dos Santos, and Dos Santos slipped and just hit him with a counter left that dropped him. And from then on, he couldn't take back the momentum. But yeah, no, I do think Ngannou can push him back. I mean, I agree. Dos Santos is overall more skilled, but he has the biggest weakness on the feet, and I think Ngannou is in a position to exploit that.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's pretty much what we're poised to, and especially in the first, second round, that's when Ngannou is most dangerous. Anything after that, barring some horrible cardio issues for JDS, he should be in his wheelhouse.
It's gutsy putting Ngannou in a 5-round main event.
Yeah.
You'd think to build him back up. Well, I guess he did. After that snooze fest against Lewis, he did starch Curtis Blades in the rematch. But still, I wouldn't want to risk having him out there for 5 rounds, because I feel like the fight against Miocic really, not too much, but it did drop his stock and like his esteem among fans.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so let's get into some more prospective MMA. Recently this week it was announced Colby Covington will be defending his interim title. I can't believe we're here, but we're here, ladies and gentlemen. Defending
God, I forgot he has an interim belt.
Dude, they pass these out like vanilla wafers at church.
Hopefully, they're not going to take away. They're not going to put a bantamweight interim belt because Cejudo got shoulder surgery.
Yeah, see, that's another ridiculous where it's like, dude, can we just call it a number one contender spot or just something other than throwing a fake belt out there? Like, how many interims?
The belt doesn't mean anything. No one cares about the interim championship anymore.
It does not. I mean, ask Tony Ferguson. It does not mean anything. And technically, this was an interview that they had with Colby Covington's manager. They never even stripped him, so he's still gonna walk out there with the freaking interim belt. It's a joke, man. Like I don't know. I really think that I wish they got rid of that whole thing. You know, it was cool when Fabricio Werdum couldn't fight for 2 years. Or Cain Velasquez was injured for 2 years. Yeah, that's what you use an interim belt for.
Yeah.
Not for this, man. But anyways, he is going to be headlining at the Prudential Center in Newark, New Jersey. Colby Covington versus Robbie Lawler. I mean, I'm already salivating at this matchup. Two former ATT guys. This is going to be a great match. Like, Siri, break this down for me.
So, Colby Covington, in my mind, is a welterweight version of what Chael Sonnen was in his prime.
Mm-hmm.
That is to say, he is a just oppressive pressure wrestler. Mm-hmm. You know, he gave Rafael Dos Anjos one of his 2 losses at welterweight, and the other person was Kamaru Usman, who went on to embarrass Tyron Woodley. So if you can on the back of nothing more than takedown pressure and clinch work, beat Rafael Dos Anjos, you're really good. You know. But the thing is, his striking is more volume, and his grappling is pressure. Can he pressure Robbie Lawler? Probably. Okay? But the thing about Robbie is, yes, sometimes there are, I wouldn't say technical holes because I think they're purposeful risks he takes because of his fighting style. Mm-hmm. You can get in on Robbie. In 2 fights with Johnny Hendricks, when their 2 title fights, he proved that, you know, that you can get in on Robbie's hips. But he's not going to make it easy on you. And because it's a title fight, it's 5 rounds. I think that Colby Covington can probably get Robbie Lawler down in the first couple rounds. Robbie's human. He can tire. But I think unlike Dos Anjos, who relies on accuracy to get his punches where they need to be, and to hurt people at welterweight especially, Robbie has that natural power. Mm-hmm. You know, he can catch Colby with an uppercut coming in and hurt him. So it's been so long since Robbie Lawler stepped in is my concern. If he was at his best, as good as he could be at the stage he is in his career, I think he could beat Colby Covington. But Covington is the better athlete. He has less mileage on him, and he does not have the type of. I'm pretty sure Covington fought before Robbie did, right?
Yeah.
Okay, man, what were their last fights? Has Colby fought since?
Colby's been on the shelf for a minute. Yeah, Colby's been on the shelf.
Yeah, so I'm going to assume that Lawler has been more Covington's been more active than Lawler. Okay, so yeah. Colby last fought last summer.
It's been a year. It's been a full year since Colby.
Full year. Yeah. Oh wow, never mind. I completely forgot because of how controversial that match was. No, Robbie fought March of this year, so Colby actually has more ring rust.
Right, exactly.
Huh.
I don't even think that's like the determinant factor, but there is something to be said about
if it's
Colby.
A pressure fighter and you just have to push your body for 25 full minutes, I would give it to the guy that's been in a ring sooner, you know?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
I'm actually, you know what? I'll lean Robbie. I thought it was the other way around. I thought Colby had fought more recently and Robbie had been shelved, but I forgot he had that kerfuffle with Astrid.
Yeah.
So you know what? Nah. I'm leaning Robbie TKO in the championship rounds.
I could see that too, and I'll tell you what. I'm gonna put it earlier. I think Colby, for what it's worth, and the RDA fight aside, well, a couple fights because Colby has fought contenders but he hasn't fought anyone that's like just a bona fide savage. Okay, maybe Brian Barberena, but Robbie Lawler is not on on a different level than Brian Barberena in terms of just what it takes to get a win over that guy. And I think, you know what, if he really wants to claim that he's the the welterweight champ, I think this is the exact fight that Robbie Lawler wanted to get his name back into the title category and to shut up a guy like Colby Covington on a stage like this, back on big ESPN. I think this is the perfect concoction that'll get Robbie Lawler's engine ticking to be like, all right, this guy needs to be done within 2 rounds. And I could see that happening for sure. Funnily enough,
I mean, I hope so. I don't like Covington, so yeah, I hope you're right. I hope I'm wrong.
No one really enjoys him, and to be honest, like he talks so much about Tyquil Woodley and stuff. Colby Covington's a pretty fucking boring fighter. I mean, let's just call a spade a spade.
If Colby Covington got laryngitis, no one would give a shit about his fighting anymore. I mean, I'm sure he still managed to like sign language racist things, but they'll be care less.
He'll find a way to the White House, but.
Yeah, just index cards.
Yeah, we'll see how 2020 goes. But yeah, no, I completely agree. I think there's certain things that Robbie Lawler has in terms of just like that, beast mode. He has stripes, man. That's all it is. He has stripes, and I don't think Colby Covington has earned all his stripes. So we're gonna see. We're gonna see if he can get them. He can get those 2 white stripes on his white belt. Hit those black stripes on his white belt heading into this fight in Newark. You know what I'm saying? My backyard. We'll see if he can do it. But I got my money on Robbie. Okay, last thing I want to talk about. Pretty big fight. This was almost as big as Malinaji and Lobov. BJ Penn fought a strip club owner. Oh man, and listen, you hate to see it. BJ Penn is one of the legends in the game, but this is one of those things where it's not even because it's bad PR, because it's really not, because nobody gives a shit. But if I'm the UFC, I got to start thinking about cutting ties, because it's just not good. It's just not good for all parties involved. I think something's got to give, man. Something's got to give, and it's just not good to see a legend like that when he should be living it up with the investments that he's made or anything like that. That's not the game here with BJ Penn, and it's a little upsetting to see, but I don't know. I don't want to get too much into that topic. Towards the end, it's going to bum us all out, but I thought the video was funny for what it's worth. It was a little bit of a, just come on. Like, what are we doing? It looked like a bad outtake of Live PD. You know what I'm saying? It was like, it's like, come on, man. Like, what are we doing? But I'm gonna just leave it at that. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to get.
It's upsetting. First off, I don't know why the UFC has been letting BJ Penn fight.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah, that's really what I wanted to talk about.
I thought listen, when he got killed by. Okay, his third fight against Frankie Edgar was a bit pathetic, but when he couldn't do anything against Yair Rodriguez, I thought that was it. The fact that they're letting him fight, let alone fight at like featherweight, what?
Yeah.
The thing is, it's this, and I think his wife or ex-wife now has domestic abuse allegations against him.
Yeah, that was.
It's fallen apart, man. Like his legacy would have been safe if he was just losing fights. We would have been like, hey, man. You've been around too long.
Man, he's lost a lot. I think it's like on a 7-fight loss.
Yeah, man. I mean,
it's getting to a point where it's like you got to save your own image. Like
plenty of world-class fighters have stuck around long after long after their bill has been due. I mean, Shogun is a more recent example, and Shogun's my favorite fighter of all time. That's been hard to watch. I mean, even great boxers? I think Julio Cesar Chavez, Roy Jones Jr. They stuck around after their great periods and didn't do too well. But combined with that, fighting a bouncer and domestic abuse, like now his legacy is starting to get. People don't want to talk about BJ Penn anymore. Yeah. And there was a time that even like myself included, we would give him the benefit of the doubt as the greatest lightweight of all time. And now we're just like, maybe Rafael dos Anjos, maybe Dustin Poirier, depending on who he beats.
Right. Yeah.
And it's upsetting to see because he really was one of the seminal UFC champions.
Right.
You know,
Exactly.
they built the lightweight division on his back, more or less.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. That's why it's just like, you know, with guys like that, because he's not just any fighter. He's not just a legend. He's like one of those guys. Those.
He's arguably. I'm not familiar with the grappling world enough to talk about it now. But at least back in his prime, he was undoubtedly the most accomplished American Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, he was the standard for submission grappling in the UFC for a while.
Right.
And it's all, no one's gonna remember that anymore.
Yeah, you hate to see it. BJ Penn, please stop fighting with strip club bouncers. You're better than that.
Not fighting, period, man. Like,
yeah, yeah. That would be ideal. Well, all right, guys. It's been a great episode. I think we covered a lot. Got a lot of MMA to look out for this weekend. We haven't really touched on Contender Series, but we're going to get back onto that. I've missed a couple weeks. So next week, definitely we'll pick up on the Contender Series stuff because that's an interesting dynamic that's been going on the past couple weeks. I haven't been able to touch on it. But definitely, for everyone here at the Body Lock, I'm Nick V. Siri.
Take care, everybody. See you next week.
Peace out.